Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is AAE Murphy, author of Viral, a true story of epidemic flu, fear, and faith. A story about care for a loved one, sacrifice, illness, flu, hospitalization, all the things that come along with being sick and then healing again. I have been showing videos with the birds in the backyard as a background, and sorry for the wobbly camera. I'm going to try to keep it still, but I thought you would enjoy watching these baby ducklings. They're called ruins. There are 6 of them. I had a dear friend come to stay with me for a few weeks, and I've been having problems with my ducks, my full-grown ducks, because one of them is kind of the outcast, and the other ones have been, there's 1 female and 3 males, and they're doing, they're afraid of the camera, I think. I've never had this kind of setup before, so they're kind of piling in the corner right now. They just had food and water, so they're resting. Excuse me. So one of the males has been the outcast, and they chase him around, and he wants to go after the female. He's a different breed, and it's funny how the animal kingdom stick to their own kind. So he lost his mate last year, and I've been looking for females. Nobody has a female that they want to give up because they're good layers. So I had to wait till spring, and I went to the store to get 2 baby girls, 2 baby ducklings, females, for him, and ended up with 6. My friend bought 6. So actually, if you read the book, Viral, a true story of epidemic flu, fear, and faith, it was Lydia. Lydia came to stay. So she bought 6. I guess you have to buy 6. When you can't just buy like 1 or 2, you have to buy 6. Okay, so I was thinking, I haven't been with you for a while because I have been entertaining, and wanted to share the topic of self-care today and some revelations that I've had. I feel like this is a kind of an urgent message, so bear with me. It's a little bit scattered, but I'll see if I can pull it all together for you. I've been super busy trying to transition from being overwhelmed by sickness and manage my life with fibromyalgia into health and normalcy. And as you know, with any chronic illness, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, lupus, or one of the devastating diseases, we really have to just take it one day at a time. I know that sounds cliche, but we do have to take it one day at a time. But that in itself is contrary to good planning, right? Because if you think about just how to get through today, then tomorrow comes and you haven't made any plans. And so there is the paradox. So while it's really good advice to just get through the day, think for today, at the end of many of my videos I say, enjoy today. Today is all we have. There's no guarantees for tomorrow. Find some joy. But that in itself presents an issue, because then you wake up tomorrow and it's today and you don't have any plans. And so that's kind of a nasty cycle, and I don't know if you've been struggling with it, but I do. I kind of vacillate between that and try to make long-term plans. So these ducks are kind of part of the short-term plan to make the other duck happy. These are all girls, and he will have his own little harem, and he'll be happy, but it's also work for me. So this is a cage that's in my kitchen. They have to be, of course, watered and fed and cared for, and their cage has to be cleaned every day, and it takes a little bit of planning, and I tend to be a person who gets a little obsessed over caring for little things, caring for others. In my past videos I've spoken about this, but I'll repeat. I have been a person who has perpetually, since I was a child, wanted to save everything. Are you one of those? So for me it was save the whale and save the seal. I remember starting off campaigning for, there's an organization here in New England, it's called IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and I started campaigning with them early on. I think it was probably the 70s, to save the seal. The seals in Canada are slaughtered for their fur, and so they're fur seals. And when the babies are born, they're pure white, and they're very valuable as far as the fur trade. So people go out onto the ice and club the babies. I don't want to get too grotesque or anything, but that was my first kind of call to action to save things. And then that just led to other things. And I've always had a tender spot in my heart for things that are helpless and harmless. And that just grew into my my persona. That was my default personality, is save everything. And I didn't think much of myself. I wasn't big on the value of money. I don't know if it was my conditioning, but I always thought that money certainly can't make you happy. So, you know, why bother? I mean, I wasn't a vagrant. I worked since I was 13 years old, but I wasn't obsessed with the obtaining of wealth. So I was more about whatever I have, I can invest in caring for others, caring for other beings. I think that set me up for, this is just my personal reflection, I think that set me up for putting myself last. I had some situations at home that, when I was a child, that dictated that I didn't care for myself. My needs came last. My needs didn't come first. And so that just became, I'm going to back out because I think I'm scaring them. That just became who I was. And, oh, they're on the move now. Oops, sorry. And that led to making poor decisions about partners and about careers, and putting myself last when it came to that, not thinking about myself. I had a scholarship for journalism to a college here in New England that I passed up so I could be in another field, in another university that was about 35-minute drive from my mom. And I chose that field because that university was, I think, the top 3 university for my field at the time. But, you know, I passed up a scholarship, and so that put me into debt, and then I was unable to get funds for university, so I had to leave after year 2. And I did end up going back eventually and completing my bachelor's, and then I went on to get my graduate degree in education. But these decisions that I made were not selfish. They were not self-sustaining. They did not nurture me. I was always basing my decisions on other people. I have done a lot of research on it. There are so many of us out there that don't care for ourselves as we should, and because of the programming that we've been raised with. because of the messages that society teaches us. I think especially as females too. I think we're just programmed to, I'm going to focus on these 4 over here. We're just programmed to care for others and neglect ourselves. And that leads me to, in my marriage to Joe, we became ill. You'll have to read the book to find out more, but we became terribly ill, and we acquired the H1N1 virus, and we didn't know it, and we kept swabbing negative for the virus, and so we were treated for other things. I had bilateral pneumonia. He had bronchitis, but we were just sick, coughing, dehydrated, and he ended up in the ICU having major surgery and positive for H1N1. His lungs shut down. He had acute respiratory distress, so he had to be on a ventilator. He was in a coma for 33 days. I was in the hospital on the floor below him, on the flu floor, in isolation with bilateral pneumonia. And I remember that it was not the first time, but I remember I really had to choose to breathe. And I remember having that discussion with myself, that conscious discussion with myself. Did you want to take another breath now, or is it time to go? So I chose to live. I felt I had more work to do, I guess. I wanted to get up and get out into my clothes and get up to see him. At one point, when I was well enough, I sat up and I put my clothes on, and the nurse came in and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to go see Joe." And she said, "What are you talking about? You are, you're in isolation. You're viral. You're contagious. You can't leave this room. You certainly can't go up to see him." I was on oxygen. It was a mess. So, okay, so there again, here I'm choosing to stay alive so that I could care for my husband, who was sicker than I. So I guess I'm sharing all these revelations to you today, with you today, because it leads to what I believe to be how we become ill with fibromyalgia. I know that there's no cure for it, and there's so much research, but not enough. And we don't really know what causes it. We know what it does to the body. We know that it's a neurological illness. We know that our pain receptors are kind of overreactive, and so we perceive everything as pain, and it's brutal. Guys, if you have it, my heart goes out to you. My mantra on these videos is that there's hope. There's hope to have quality of life. There's hope to get up every day and engage in your life and in society. And I tend to be a very deep thinker, so in another video I mentioned this, but I feel like as a child I must have been a lot like Eeyore. You know, just kind of gloom and doom, always thinking very deeply, and how we're going to solve the world's problems, and never thinking about myself. And I'm more joyful now since fibromyalgia, but we do, I think, put ourselves into a psychological place where we open ourselves up for everything, all the darkness, all the negative energies, along with the joy of looking at these little babies. Oh, I'm sorry for the wobbly camera. You know, we tend to open ourselves up for the opposite of that. Let's see if I'm not explaining that. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Because we are campaigners for others, because we are spending our lives, investing all our energy, pouring from our pitcher, we are not filled up. This joy, like this right now, this is very sustaining. I hope you're enjoying this. These are very cute. They're just so cute. But that doesn't sustain us over time. It doesn't. I think it sustains the soul temporarily, but there has to be a well running within ourselves deeply of nurture, self-care, self-nurturing, self-concern, self-protection. And when Joe was released from the rehab, probably 3 months or so or more after the whole episode of us both being hospitalized and near death, it was my responsibility to care for him. So he was not able to, he was barely able to walk. It took him about 2 minutes to walk with a walker across the living room. I remember that because the visiting nurse, it was 2.5 minutes, the visiting nurse came and timed him. We had to have our bathroom rehabbed for his mobility needs, so he could get in the shower. There were railings, they had to install the handicap railings on everything and change the toilet, change the height of the sink. He was in great need. He had a colostomy that had the bag had to be changed 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day. I had to do all the cooking and all the cleaning and all the bill paying and all the preparation and all the transportation to the doctors and the organization of all the healthcare professionals that would come and provide care and the visiting nurses, and it was just all on me. And I remember just running 16 hours a day, and I ran myself into the ground, really. And who wouldn't, right? I mean, that's the rehab hospital that accepted him. The second one said, we're not even going to accept him unless there's an aftercare plan. So what is the plan for when he gets discharged? What's the discharge plan? And I said, well, I certainly have to go back to work. I can't stay home with him. And they said, well, we're not going to take him. So I ended up agreeing when he went to this rehab that I would stay home and care for him. And neither one of us are working. It was just a ridiculous situation, and probably not as bad as many out there who have catastrophic illnesses and it changes their life and they end up living under a bridge somewhere. They lose their home, they lose everything, and they live on the streets. So I'm not at all complaining to you. I'm just saying that my investment of my time and energy to my husband, who was also helpless, and that, I think, my investment of that energy was the final straw. My body just said, nope, we're not going to do this anymore. And I started to be weak, and I couldn't think straight, and I stuttered, and I couldn't complete sentences, and my hair fell out. A lot of my hair, about 50% of my hair, I think, fell out. And that was the defining moment when I said, yeah, I think I need to get to the doctor to find out what's going on. I was depressed. I cried all the time. I was just so deeply inside myself, just work, and bite my tongue and don't say anything. And no matter what Joe did, don't complain and don't give him a hard time because the poor guy, look what he's been through. And it was just a total abandonment of self. And the body knows, and the soul knows that we are not caring for ourselves in the way that we should. And so I went to the doctor because my hair was in clumps in the shower drain, and he asked me what my other symptoms were, and I told him, and he said, I think you have fibromyalgia. It was, he gave me an exam and all that, but I think that was the diagnosis. And that was about a year after I became ill. So, okay, so to wrap it up, I'm here to tell you today that it's ironic that I have these 6 new babies because now I'm spending a lot of time caring for them. But there has been a shift in my mindset. I do not obsess over what I used to obsess over, and I have been doing that. And I have to tell you, even while I had fibromyalgia, I was still thinking and in denial, I'm going to beat this. I'm not as bad as everybody else. I can get through this. I weaned myself off of 2 different prescription medications. I don't recommend it, but I said I'm going to be the poster child for someone who's living with fibromyalgia and having a good quality of life. And I think my will led me to where I am now today. with a lot of good fortune, with the blessing of people who care for me, with the blessing of family and friends, and I guess providence, I think I would have to say. I feel like that has been my soul's purpose now, to survive this and to tell the story about how to care for oneself and not to pour from an empty pitcher, because that's what creates this hypervigilance within our soul and within our bodies, that we're not caring for ourselves. We're an open wound, and we have to kind of stop what it is that got us to that place, and go deeply and do some self-reflection, and to analyze and to think it through, and to say, these are the mistakes that I made, but they're not mistakes that you would detest yourself for. We have to love ourselves enough to forgive ourselves, to realize that we made the choices that we made at the time because we thought that was the best. But now, as we've evolved and as I've evolved, I've transcended a lot of those proclivities to care for others beyond myself. Even in the past 3 years, I have still become a little obsessive about acceptance of others. Acceptance by others. Sorry, not of others. I accept others. I want to be accepted. I don't want to fight with people. I don't want to have problems with people. I'm almost like the peace at any price person. Peace at any price. Sorry, it's early. I'm kind of moving away from that now, in peace and in harmony with one another. I'm not judging anybody else. I'm not putting myself on any different level than anybody, but I am focusing completely on myself. Almost completely. I'm not there yet, but almost completely on myself. Now, I do what I know I must do. I take care of things that I know nobody else is going to care about, except for the duckies. These are my one exception. And I still do a lot of things that I did before. I still have a lot of pets, and I do that because they get me out of bed. These little girls get very hungry in the morning, and they peep very loudly. I wish you could see them and hear them. And maybe I'll show you. But they get me out of bed in the morning, and my chickens get me out of bed in the morning. And by thinking of them, I'm not thinking about my pain. So I hope that resonates with you. By thinking of others, I don't think about my debilitation, my level of debilitation. So it's a double-edged sword, I would say. And I think that's just to conclude this message today. It's a double-edged sword, caring for others and caring for myself. And I think I'm coming to a place where I'm finding the balance and putting myself first for the absolutes, for the things that I really can't ignore. But honestly, how cute are these little girls? Okay, so I hope you find peace and joy in the day today. Today is truly all we have. But I hope that this message is a slightly different version of what I've said in past videos, in that I'm sharing this kind of urgent message with you about the transformation that I'm going through to understand myself and understand how I got to the place where I was vulnerable and weak, and I had no defenses, and I contracted or developed fibromyalgia. It's not contagious, so we can't catch it. So, right, the healing has to come from within. The journey is within. We have to look within. We have to analyze and put the pieces together like a puzzle and figure out, how is it that I came to this place where I developed this horrible disease. And I don't recommend doing it a lot. I don't recommend obsessing, and I don't recommend blaming ourselves. But I truly believe that we have to go within to cure ourselves. So there are 10 million plus people with fibromyalgia in the United States. These are CDC, the Center for Disease Control stats. 3 to 4 million people, newly diagnosed people annually. Oops. Oh, they just. What happened? What happened, girls? Did I make a noise? I'm sorry. 3 to 4 million people diagnosed annually, 16 million approximately worldwide with fibromyalgia. This is a crisis. This is an epidemic. I'm sorry if you have the disease. I am here for you. I will post this to my YouTube channel called Fibromyalgians, where I talk about messages of hope and getting through it and things that we can do to nurture ourselves and love ourselves and heal ourselves. I wish you a good day. This is AAE Murphy, author of Viral, A True Story of Epidemic Flu, Fear, and Faith, talking about fibromyalgia and giving you hope for the day. Sending you love and blessings. Say goodbye, duckies. Say goodbye, girls.